Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. Happy Sunday, everybody, not Monday. That was for you, Russ Tyndall. You know what's going on. Man, it's been a day. Typical Oregon winter weather. It's raining, so if you can hear that through the microphone, I do apologize, but there's nothing I can do about it. Let's see. This morning, the video that went live was me adding a second touch plate to the Avid CNC. Now, it was received better than I thought it would be. I was hesitant to do this simply because of it's a case of narrow casting. A lot of people will look at it and go, well, I don't have an Avid, and just bypass it. Well, more of you clicked on the link and actually watched the video than I expected. And thank you for doing that. And special shout out here. Thank you, Martin Pearson, for becoming a member. I do appreciate it. If you go to my channel page and click on the community tab, after we're done here, of course, click on the community tab. You'll find links to the members only live stream tomorrow evening. And welcome aboard. You'll also find links to all the past episodes and any special announcements and things like that I put up for members only. That's where I do a lot of communication, but not all. More on that later. Uh, Welcome aboard, and thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate it. Also, before I get started, I wanted to give a special shout out and a special thank you to Steve over with Harneal Media. He is the sponsor of Mark Lindsay CNC.com. And I'm here to tell you, if you are building up a CNC business, if you are looking to create or increase your web presence for that business, or even just a personal page, uh, check out Hardio Media. Steve is the man, the myth, the legend. Again, he's a sponsor of Mark Lindsay CNC, but even if he wasn't, I would be praising him up one side and down the other. He's everywhere all at the same time. And when you are dealing with Harneo Media, you're dealing with Steve. It's not some nameless, faceless person in a call center that you'll never talk to again. You're dealing with Steve, and that's all there is to it. It's 100% personal service. He knows what he's doing, and he's good at it. And he is priced competitively, and he specializes in makers websites, but that's not all he does. So check out Harneal Media. There's a link in every video of mine. I've gone back even to stuff before I had a website. Check him out and tell him Mark sent you. So let's see what we got going on here. Yeah, the video this morning was more for folks to kind of let you know not to be afraid to try to accessorize your CNC router. It was, yes, I had the need to add another touch plate, and yeah, there are other options I could have taken, but I thought, what better time to show that you can modify, you can accessorize, and it is doable. Now, as I said in the video, reach out to your machine's manufacturer, because as I found out with dealing with Avid CNC, and first of all, finding out if this was even possible, let alone feasible, a lot of times they have options and they have parts and accessories that are not listed on their website because there's not a super high demand. Now, that seems counterintuitive to me. It would appear to me that if you wanted to create the demand, folks have to know that there's an option there. And folks need to know that if you're trying to do something like this, they can help you through it. Um, I worked with a gentleman by the name of Eric, and I just asked him specifically, is this possible? And he said, yeah, uh, it was no big deal. These are the parts that you need, and we have them available. And I said, okay, well, they're not on the website. He says, yeah, we don't list them on the website because there's not enough demand for them, and we don't want to confuse folks. Well, that seems counterproductive to me and counterintuitive, but what the hey? I'm not a marketer. So let's see. Pablo Diablo has a directly related question, and I see Jeffrey Stewart has one too, and I'll get to you in just a second. Don't you need a fourth axis jacking point on the control box for a touch probe? No, it's not a fourth axis. It depends on the controller that you're using, and it depends on the breakout board that you're using. Now, on my old system with the Xylatex drive box, I could I set up, and this is the triple edge finder that I used to use with the Gatton CNC and the Xylatex drive box, and that's why I added this, because I had it. Um, all you need to do is connect it as a uh, input. And then you go in, I went into Mach 3 and I set up that input as a normally open connection and use that for the touch probe along with the screen set that I was using. Well, the Avid CNC control box comes with a port that's dedicated with an M12 connector for the M12 cable that's dedicated to that touch probe. And Mach 4, the Avid CNC Mach 4 screen set, has the touch probe system or macro built into it. So if you're using an Avid with the Avid controller, no, you don't need that extra port. It's already there. That's another reason I say check with your machine's manufacturer, because they may have something similar that you don't know about. But it doesn't use an axis port. It uses an input, the same as a limit switch or a homing switch would. You just have to go into the controller and tell it what that input is and to activate it. So, um, and for those of you who missed it, didn't know what I was talking about as far as the macro is concerned, share screen, go over here and look at Mach 4. In Mach 4 in the Avid CNC profile, it's right here, Auto Z touch plate. I do not have a CNC router hooked up to this computer, so that's why I'm going to get various different errors and warnings. And it pops up. I got to drag it over here to this screen right here. And that this is uh, the probe signal screen for using the touch plate. Now, Jeffrey Stewart says, now that you have your new touch plate, why would you ever use the Avid CNC touch plate? Simply because the Avid CNC touch plate is a three-way touch plate. Yes, the triple edge finder is too, but the Avid CNC touch plate uses a different method for setting X and Y axis. Okay. The triple edge finder has a much smaller diameter orifice here for setting your X and Y axis, and the macro that for use with the triple edge finder worked in a different way than the macro for using the Avid CNC touch plate did. Also, the Avid CNC touch plate is spring loaded. When I first went down this road, let me go ahead and stop sharing here. When I first went down this road, what I had intended on doing was just taking off this trim ring and filing this out, or just machining it out so that that 2-inch bit would fit down in there. But then I got to thinking, wait a minute, I may end up getting bigger bits than this. I may end up with a larger surfacing bit. So why not just hook up another touch plate where I didn't have this ring and it wasn't an issue? Well, in taking this apart to look into it, I discovered that each of these plates these brass plates are about 3/8 of an inch thick, and it's spring loaded. So that if you do get it starts pressing down on that spring, and it's a stiff spring. If it starts pressing down on that spring and compressing it, you're headed for a crash. You can hit the panic button and shut everything down. So I could, and that was one of the other options. I could ditch the Avid CNC touch plate and just use the triple edge finder and write a completely new macro to be able to use the triple edge finder with the Avid CNC, or I could just plug in a second touch plate and use whichever one I need at the time. This one is the one this is the default touch plate, So let's see here. Russell says I don't get how the edge finder works. With a 2-flute bit, there's no flute to touch both the X and Y. The way the macro worked with the triple edge finder, you didn't have to set the bit diameter. The bit, you put it down in this orifice here, and when it moved in Y, it didn't matter which position the bit was in. When it moved, for instance, in Y, it would move up here and touch, then come back to where it started, then move this way and touch. It knew how far it moved, how far apart those two touch points were, and it just moved this to the center of that measurement. Then it did the same thing in X and moved to the center of that measurement. And that was how it set the Y, or of the XY. With the Avid CNC touch probe, go back to sharing here. Entire screen, go back here. With the Avid CNC touch probe, you do have to set the tool diameter up here. Let's say 0.25. And when you have that set, let's say I want to touch off down here to this corner, it will tell you it's going to move in Y first. And it will move up and it'll touch the inside edge, then move back down to where you had put the bit, and then tell you to spin the flute so that the flute was facing in the X direction. And then you click OK, and then it moves over and touches. Now, I can't do that to show you how it's done simply because I don't have a CNC. There's no Ethernet smooth stepper hooked up to this computer, so it wouldn't work. The other option is, and this is the one I use, is I have a precision ground 1/2-inch dowel. I just chuck that in the collet, and my diameter stays set to 1/2 inch. And now it doesn't matter which way it's facing. I just click OK when it prompts me to spin the bit because it's that precision 1/2-inch ground dowel, steel dowel. So there are ways of, tricking the system to do what you want it to do. But all it does is, it just figures out the center of where these two measurements were, and knowing the bit diameter helps dial in this macro. The other macro for the triple edge finder didn't need that. All it needed was the actual touch plate thickness. So let's see here. Scott Malak says, couldn't you stick a spacer on the bottom of the touch plate to make the two the same thickness? I could. But excuse me. But when I get adventurous enough to start attempting to machine metal, my plans are to go ahead and make a 1-inch thick touch plate out of aluminum, and that'll eliminate any of that. As it sits right now, I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to put a big label across the top of the screen up there on that monitor right there, saying touch plate thickness, because I know me. But that's why this one is going to be the default. The only time I will ever use this is with a bit that is too big to physically fit down in the Avid touch plate. And to be fair, if you go back and check out my video on work offsets, once you set a work offset, if you continue to use that work offset, that fixture offset rather, not work offset, once you set that fixture offset, you don't need to set your XY0. The Pirates and several other projects that I've done since setting that fixture offset, I've never had to use the touch plate to set my XY axis. I just put the corner of the material right there where that work offset is, using those 1/4-inch dowels, fasten it to the table, tell it to go into G59, that fixture offset, tell it to go to XY0, and boom. So, you know. Yes, the touch plate has to be conductive. And this triple edge finder is milled out of a solid piece of billet aluminum, and that's what I would do. So let's see here. So can you still add a fixed touch plate for tool measurement? I guess you could. I personally don't use a fixed touch plate for tool depth, but I'm not a machinist. I don't use a oh, come on. I don't use an automatic tool changer. That's what I was trying to get to. Is aluminum conductive? Oh yeah, there used to be aluminum wire, but the problems with aluminum wire were manyfold, so they got rid of them. You know. Peter Van Vliet says, looks like you can do just X or just Y, which is nice. Yes, you can do just X, just Y, or just Z. You're not locked into using any particular one. So, let's see here. Michael Mazalik says, any consideration to adding a laser pointer to set X0, Y0? You could use the XY offset option in Vectric software. I just haven't. I'm just starting to accessorize. So that is something that I've been thinking about, and I have a laser pointer with crosshairs, but I haven't taken the step to try to add it to the Avid yet. So let's see here. Matt Haas had one. I'm bummed my touch plate fails about 1 in 20 times, especially with the 1/16 inch bit. What, if anything, can I do? That's why I continuously and constantly do what I call a sanity check, and that is connect up that ground and touch that bit. Lift up the touch plate and touch that bit before you hit that Z0 button. Just make sure you got connectivity. That's another reason why I was testing around with the touch plate after I got it all hooked up, um, was to see what parts of the bit were conductive and what parts weren't. Um, because I do have some bits, V bits and some straight bits that are painted and the tips are carbide tipped. The tips, those carbide tips are conductive, but that paint isn't. So I have to watch where I put the magnet or even where I clip a alligator clip. That's why I always tried to go for the shank and put that alligator clip around the shank of the bit. When I was using the triple edge finder on the Gatton, it had the alligator clip on it, and I could just clip it around the edge of the shank. And you didn't need much shank sticking out of that collet to be able to clip it. And but this half-inch bit was just the shank. The half-inch shank is just too big for that alligator clip. That's why I switched over to the magnet. Speaking of magnets, they the K and J, um, the K and J magnetics that I bought them from, they had 3 different options as far as mounting. For those of you who are searching for this kind of magnet, they are called cup magnets, CUP. I didn't mention that in the video. Basically, all it is it's a magnet that has a metal, a metal cup around it. And they had 3 different mounting options. And for the price, I went ahead and I ordered all 3. This one here has just a hole drilled through it that is countersunk. And so I could just run a screw into a nut through it that way. The other one actually has a female threaded insert built in. And this is the type that Avid ships. Theirs has a threaded boss inside of it. And it doesn't have the threaded boss. It's the countersunk type with a nut on the back. You can just barely see that that's a nut. Okay. Put your glasses on, Mark, and you'll see things. Cool. I thought that was a threaded nut. Let's see. Mine only has a magnet. I was placing that magnet on the collet nut. Is that okay? Not if it's failing once out of 20. Stick it to the bit shank itself. Stick it to the bit shank itself if it's at all possible. Okay. Let's see here. The fuzz says, isn't there a risk of the touch plate moving when probing XY? On the bottom of the touch plate, you have this boss right here. And that boss, let's see, normally I would put it on the bottom left corner of the material. Now, this is going to be backwards for you. And it would sit along those edges. And you rest it right up there against the edge in X and Y. Now, as the bit is moving, it is moving very slow. The feed rate when the bit is moving to touch off is 4 inches per minute. It doesn't have that far to go, maybe an inch at the most. So it doesn't take long for it to touch. And once it contacts, it stops because it doesn't want to bend or break your bit. So as far as it coming loose, if you watch the videos, I do reach up and I hold it just in case. But if anything, what that bit is doing is it's pressing up and it's pressing in to make sure this touch plate stays up against that corner. Okay. So is there any risk in it coming loose? I guess there is, but yeah, you know. Pablo Diablo wants to know coded tips on bits. So far, every coded bit I have tried, it is conductive, and that's why I test them. When I get a new bit, I'll set the touch plate down and I'll stick the magnet to the bit, and then I'll just touch it. And if it makes connection, I know whatever coding is conductive. But I think just about every bit that I have purchased that has any kind of a coating on them, whether it be the Spectra coating from Amana or what's the titanium nitride, something like that. Every one of them has been conductive, and they work just fine. Um, let's see here. Pablo says, how do you set XY with the V bit? You don't. You put in an end mill, or like I do in my case, I just put a dowel in the collet and use that to set the XY. Then after that, I change that. I don't even use the wrenches to tighten it up. I just put the 1/2 inch dowel in the 1/2 inch collet, put it in there hand tight, do my XY 0, pull the dowel and the collet out, put in my V bit in the proper collet, tighten it up with the wrenches, and then set my Z0. Because it doesn't take Z0 when it's measuring X and Y. Those are different operations, and it stops you and prompts you at every turn. So, let's see. Rick French has an excellent point. If you don't take your collet completely out and clean it with each tool change, sawdust will occasionally stop connectivity. Don't ask how I know. Very, very true. In fact, that's something that I recommend everybody do. I take the collet and the bit out as soon as I'm done using that bit for the rest of that project or the rest of that day. I don't store the CNC with a bit or a collet in the spindle, or on the old CNC with a bit in the router. The reasons for that are manyfold. Number one, I don't want to run the risk of corrosion because I live in such a high humidity area. Uh, we get week-long periods of 100% humidity with very dense fog. So corrosion is an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing battle. Corrosion and wood rot are the biggies here. So I don't want to risk the chance of a shank or the collet corroding with that shank in that collet. The other thing is when you run a material, especially a soft wood, they're the worst. When you run a material, you're creating chips, but there are also resins and pitch and various other now chemicals within the wood that are all natural. It's all a part of the material, but they get released in almost an aerosol or gaseous form. And there have been cases, I'm sure you have had this fight before, if you have used routers or router tables in the past, where if you keep a bit in a collet for too long, that stuff will collect and almost concrete itself together to where you've got to put that collet in a vise and use something to drive that bit out of that collet. So I find that just by taking the bit out of the collet at the end of the day, every bit out of every collet, and then clean them up with just a little bottle brush, uh, you can go over into the baby section of the baby food and baby formula section of just about any grocery store. You can get what they call a nipple brush, and it's a little nylon, like a miniature bottle brush, and it'll scour that sucker out, scour out that collet and keep it nice and clean. I have switched over to 91% isopropyl alcohol for cleaning my bit shanks and collets, and I've just have never had an issue. Keep it nice and clean. Rick French says the sawdust will conduct moisture out of the air, increasing the chance of oxidization. Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Jeff over at JMJ Love Dance. I take the collet and collet nut off between every bit change and use air hose to clear any dust. Dust between the collet springs can affect how it clamps the bit. True, true. Absolutely, yes. They're getting expensive. I couldn't believe the price. One of those little keyboard dusters, little can of compressed air. $11. Are you kidding me? For air? I used to keep one of those handy. Now, not for no $11. I got a compressor. It's free. Well, price of electricity, but I got to keep the compressor charged anyway. Let's see. Let's go back over here and okay. Paul Clutter wants to know. I have to ask. I'm new with routers. What is a touch plate for? Been using the paper method. I could look it up, but being I'm here, it's what we're here for. Exactly what we're here for. Basically, what it is, the touch plate is used, and not all touch plates are created equal. Most folks use a touch plate to set their Z0 only. And you will have, and every machine is a little bit different. Every spindle is a little bit different. Basically, you have a conductive surface here that is wired into your controller. On most, not all, on most systems, you'll need a touch plate and you'll need a magnet or a clip or some way of grounding. And this gets attached to the bit. And when the bit comes down with this magnet attached, the bit comes down and it touches that touch plate. It completes a circuit that lets the controller know to stop, set your Z axis to 0, then it'll lift up out of the way so you can take all this out of the road. It's repeatable, it's predictable, and it's far more consistent and far more accurate than using a piece of paper or eyeballing it. Now, I know people who do both. They use a piece of paper or they eyeball it. Peter Pasquello is the king of eyeballing it, and he gets good, consistent results. But he also doesn't do a lot of 3D carving. If you're just basically surfacing material, or if you are just cutting a lot of profiles where you don't have to have 3-digit accuracy on your Z0, then a touch plate is kind of overkill. They're certainly not necessary. But if you do a lot of V carving, or you're doing a lot of 3D carving, or if you're carving down in the bottom of pockets a lot, or in machined areas, then a touch plate will give you a consistent result every time. It will a more consistent result. It will also help you. A 3-way touch plate will also help you recover if you're in the middle of a carve and the power goes out. Because now you can go back and you can find your X, Y, and Z0, and it will be the same as the X, Y, and Z0 you had before. I've got a video on my channel where that happened to me. I was running a project. I had one 15 amp circuit in the old shed, and I was running a project. I forgot, left the heater turned on, and blew a breaker. So things got dark real fast. everything shut off. I thought, oh, great. Well, this was a great opportunity. I was in the process of videoing another project. So I had video. I thought this is a great opportunity. Let me show how I use a three-way touch plate to recover from a power outage. So I did it, and it works. That's not to say you can't recover using other methods. Something like this or this just makes it one heck of a lot easier. So, let's see. Let's see. Russell Faraday says dirty or worn collets equal all sorts of problem. Yes, and good point, Russell. Uh, Collets are expendable items. They have a life. You can only clamp and unclamp so many times before cracks will start to form from stress, or the ability to clamp becomes less and less. You'll find you have to tighten that collet a lot more to secure that bit. Corrosion, as good as we may be as far as maintenance is concerned, um, there are some things that are just not, that are just out of our control. And unless you have a zero humidity environment, corrosion is a thing. Collets are not expensive. A lot of us have no problem spending $40 to buy a bit, but we don't want to spend $15 to buy a new collet. And that's false economy, because you're going to destroy a lot of material, break a lot of bits if your collet's not in first class condition. They are expendable. So, let's see here. Let's see here. Yes, Sargon Tavor, good friend of the channel, says make sure you have a moisture filter on the compressor. Yes, that should be number one. I mean, water traps everywhere. Let's see here. Okay, I think I've caught up. Let me jump over here to some of the questions that we have. In the unfinished business category, Scott Mallock says he contacted Vectric about that bowl bit problem. For those who may not have heard or don't remember, there was an issue when using a bowl bit that if you had a start depth of 0, it would cut along a vector that defined the area to be carved out. It would carve along it just fine. But if you set a start depth, let's say you used a larger bit to hog out most of the material of that area, and then went in with a start depth just to use the bowl bit for the final profile, it would, the toolpath that got calculated would either make the, it would either make the, it would either overshoot and overcut the size of the bowl or undercut it. I've heard both. Well, Scott got a hold of Vectric and asked them about it, and he said that the ball nose and that they said the ball nose that interact with the start depth. You have to set your start depth to 0, set your flat depth, and edit your passes to compensate. Okay. Okay. So put your start depth to 0, set a flat depth, set your depth of cut, and then edit the passes. I think I understand what they're saying. Pablo Diablo, bull bit or ball bit? Both. Both. I've heard the same complaint from both. In fact, I've gotten 2 emails this week since we talked about it, Scott, and they weren't connected to that discussion, They were just people who cold emailed me about it. They were having the same issue. Let me see if I have this correct, what you're saying here, Scott. And I imagine your understanding is probably about the same as mine. But let's say I'm going to use a bowl bit on this. And we'll close. We'll come over here and we will do a pocket toolpath. And I'll cut it down to a 1/2 inch deep, 0.5. Oops. Backspace. I got too much stuff here on my keyboard tray. All right, and I want to remove that end mill and put in my bowl bit. Let's go here, bowl and tray. Let's use this one, select. Okay, we want to do a 1/2 inch deep bowl. With no start depth, we're working just fine. Everything is great. But if I want to rough that out with a bigger bit that uses a wider step over, that's where the problems came in. So tell me if I'm wrong, Scott. What they're suggesting is, let's say that that's my final dimension. That's the final depth that I want. What I would do is set it up with 0 start depth, but then come here and edit the passes so that my pass depth is, let's say, I have hollowed it out to, I've gone ahead and I've hogged it out to 0.4. I want to reduce the number of passes to make that bit cut deeper. And then I want to adjust this pass, set the last pass thickness to, oh, let's say 0.04 for giggles. Then remove remove that one so that it's going to come down and basically air cut that one pass, then come down and cut that last final 40 thousandths. Okay. Now, Martin Pearson, right. That's exactly what I was basically saying. So I could just go ahead and get rid of that and just set it to do that in one pass. So is that correct? Is that what you got out of that, Scott? Yes, you could just use one pass. Yes. Okay. All right. That works. So, we'll go ahead and we'll cancel that. So just have it do it in one pass. You know what? That makes sense. That makes sense. So, uh, how much was your CNC? That's a loaded question. The first one I built was $891. They run anywhere from, let's say, entry level. You're looking at about, well, I've seen them on Amazon for as low as on sale $154, and they'll go up into 7 and 8 digits. So it's kind of like building a race car. Speed costs money. How fast can you afford to go? Well, CNCs can be very pricey. So this one, I think the total came into $11,000. So just under 12. But again, I built my first one for 891. And I mean, I cut out all the parts, built it, the whole thing. That's without software. Software is a different story, but the machine itself could go in any direction. Okay, to make things even more confusing, aren't they also called bullnose? No. Some people may call them bullnose, but a bullnose and a ball nose are two different things. A bullnose is a particular type of molding profile. And I guess if you want to do 3D work, a ball nose can carve a bull nose, but a bull nose can't carve a ball nose. So, oh yeah, Paul, you ain't seen nothing yet. Good friend of the channel, Bart Bixel. Haven't seen him around in a while, but I know he's busy. He works up in Seattle for a major aircraft manufacturer, let's say. He was telling me when he came down here, I did some work for him. He was telling me about the new CNC they just got in. It was a Thermwood that was a combination 5-axis CNC router and 3D printer. And I don't mean they're using little spools of PLA filament. I mean, they're putting in hoppers, filling this hopper with ABS pellets the size of your thumb. And this thing is printing big surfaces of aircraft parts and then coming back with the 5-axis CNC and machining it down to spec. Thermwood has a video of this very same machine on their website showing it 3D printing and then machining the hull of a 16-foot boat. Just the software has 6-digit price tag to run that machine. So yeah, it's like drag racing. Speed costs money. How fast can you afford to go? So Scott says, yes, I almost called you Scallock. Sorry about that, Scott. It's the radius that interacts with the start depth. So, okay, I get it. Let's see here. Cruise back up here. Let's okay. Patrick Woodco wants to know, do you have an alternate method other than the 3D printed mount to mount the dial indicator to the spindle to check for high and low spots on the surface plate like in your tramming video? Yes, my very first, I just saw it the other day. I think it's in the other shed. I can't go get it. My very first mount was just a piece of plywood and a 1/4-inch dowel. And I drilled a hole to mount that 1/4-inch dowel perpendicular to the piece of plywood. Then I drilled a hole that my dial indicator would slip into, and I chucked it up in there, cross drilled to clamp, and just mounted it that way. You know, just a piece of plywood. And in fact, I was going to do exactly the same thing when I went to tram this, but a buddy of mine up north of me a little bit, he 3D printed one and sent one to me and said, here, try this. So, of course, I said, thank you. And, you know, it worked out really well. If you go back to that video, there's a link to the Thingiverse page of the guy who came up with that 3D print file. So if you want the file to 3D print your own, it's on Thingiverse. And I can't remember the guy's name right off the top of my head, but if you go back to that video where I'm tramming the Avid, it's in there. The link is in the description. So, let's see. Let's see. Okay, so we got that taken care of. And Peter Van Vliet wants to know, how would you design a logo from scratch that has letters which are artistic, like the C's in Coca-Cola has a large lower swoop, Vectric, or a separate app, then import as bitmap? Just draw it in. Just draw it in VCarve. That is okay. I'm probably the least artistic guy you know. Um, and I mean that. I don't have an artistic bone in my body. um, my stick figures are crooked. Uh, Basically, just take a letter C and a script font of whatever looks good to you, and draw it in, convert it to curves, and then start playing with Bezier curves and arcs, and just find something that looks good to you. If you're good with something like Adobe Illustrator or Inkscape or any CAD CAM or just CAD program, if you're good at drawing anything, basically, uh, you could come up with something that looks good to you. If you really wanted to, and I do not advocate this, you could actually import that logo, download a bitmap, import that logo, and change it to your liking. But I do not advocate copyright infringement. And, that's all I can say to that. RB Woodwork has an excellent point that the new tracing feature, I think you mean freehand drawing, works well for that. And he's absolutely right. It does. That freehand tracing, the freehand drawing is a pretty cool deal. Excuse me. Let's see here. Jeffrey Stewart says an oval profile for an outside cut is made about 5/16 inches left in X. Y cuts just outside the line as expected. This does not happen for an inside cut in the same project using the same center. Wow. Is this a regular thing? Is this happen with other projects or this particular file? If you put a piece of scrap down and try to cut an oval, does it do this consistently? Is it just something with ovals, or is it this just this particular file? There's a lot of variables here. Some Yes, I answered this in email. Was it yesterday or maybe this morning? But for some reason, I thought you were talking about an oval profile for an outside cut. It doesn't happen with an inside cut. Okay, so we're getting to. All right, let me research that, because there's something else that I did not. I did not realize that. So let me research this and I'll get back with you. Okay. You've only seen it in ovals. All right. I will, let me research that. Okay. And I'll try to get back to it. Let's see here. We're almost at an hour. Funwayo Mafuleka, and I hope I didn't butcher your name. What's the best way to cut a wider profile line with a 1/4 inch diameter bit? Turn it into a pocket. If you need to cut wider than 1/4 inch, either use a bigger bit or make it a pocket, which may mean you have to draw some in, offset your profile and then pocket that area out, if that makes any sense. Let's see. Okay, you've only seen that in oval. Okay, so kind of disregard my email because I didn't read. Uh, I didn't see that that was the problem. Cutting to the outside shifts it over to the left, but cutting inside does not. I didn't see. And I can only claim my brain on Mark. Let's see here. JJ wants to know, can a toolpath for a 3D model be done for a small area of the model? How do you select a small portion of the overall model? There are a couple of ways of doing it. If you're talking about something like going back in and using a smaller bit to carve just detail that can't be reached with the larger bit, that's a process called rest machining, and I have a video on that. Rest machining. I just made a note to put a link to that in the description of this video as soon as we're done. If you're not talking about that, let's say you have a star in a circle and you just want to carve that star, you don't want to carve that circle, what you'll need to do is edit that model to eliminate that circle. And let's see, let me get over here into Aspire and I'll show you this real quick here. Let's say, let me get rid of this and delete that, come back over, go into clip art, and let's find something to play with. Let's say, boy, I want, well, that's not a very good example. Boy, trying to find something that's a good example. Let's say I want this bottle cap, and ignore the fact that I already have the bottle cap. Okay. What I can do is I can make sure that this model is selected. Then come over here into the modeling tab. And this icon right here, create a vector boundary around the selected. Nope, that's not going to do it. I would have to use the old rest machining method. Oh, man. Because what I would need to do is come in and trace around the bottle cap. And then there is a icon right here to clear the area. I would select that vector and clear the area outside of it. Or you can, you're a genius, Michael. Thank you. Trace bitmap. Let's go back over to the drawing tab. Come on, Mark. You know where trace bitmap is. There it is. Boom. And let's just do a quick preview here. There we go. All right. So we can apply, then close. Then I'll get rid of this vector because I don't need that. Select this vector in the modeling tab. Okay, select the model, shift, select the vector, clear all outside, and now I have the bottle cap without that dish. Now I know that was a lot of stuff right off the top, okay? Now you can also, Martin also has a great option here as well. If you didn't want to do that, oops, what you can do is come back to the 2D view just so you can see it. Control Z to undo that. Now I can select the model, select the vector, come over here into my finishing toolpath and use that selected vector. And it doesn't change the model at all. It just machines only to that vector. So I'm not going to change anything else just for this. We'll calculate it, and you can see it's only going to machine up to that vector. Is that an Aspire only? This that I just showed is not. This is everything. Everything. Probably not cut 2D, but VCarve and Aspire, this will work in. Let me turn that off, come back over here. These two icons, I don't believe are in VCarve. I think these two, clear area inside and clear the area outside, I think those are Aspire only. Michael, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. But that appears to be the case. I don't think they're part of VCarve Desktop or VCarve Pro. So Martin Pearson says they are not in VCarve. Okay, thank you for checking. I do appreciate it, Martin. Okay, let's go ahead and let's wrap this up. We've already been up for an hour. If I did not get to your question, please put them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer when we're done offline or when we're done here. I'll go ahead and I'll put a link to my rest machining video down in the description of this video when we're done, only because I said so. And other than that, I believe that was the only thing I talked about. Yes, it was. Martin, as a new member, you probably don't know this, but you will soon. Tomorrow, channel members, Sargon, Martin, Blaine, Brooks. Tomorrow night, members only live stream at 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. Go to the community tab. You'll find the link to that live stream. And we have a good crew that shows up. Lots of interesting projects, lots of very cool topics, and I do look forward to meeting up with you over there. So once again, thank you for becoming a member, Martin. If you would like information on how to become a channel member, you can click the join button down right next to the subscribe button. A panel will pop up and a video will play that'll tell you all about channel membership. So, you are in the UK. All right. Well, all of the live streams are available for replay for members only. So you can go over there and check out those links. I don't know, because you remember, I don't know if they will show up on the live tab on my channel page. They may or may not. Maybe one of my channel members could let me know if that happens. And also, we have a members only Facebook group. So I'll be reaching out to you to invite you to that members only Facebook group. We do have a live chat, group chat, and video chats and all kinds of stuff. And it's a good group to hang around in. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Next week will be a open live Q&A. I've got a couple of projects to finish up that are pretty small. A few of them in the house, and then I'm not going to do any spoilers on what's coming up because I'm not sure that it is coming up. But next weekend will be a live Q&A, and that's all I can think of. Yes, that's all I can think of. So Y'all take care. Thank you for joining me. Thank you to all of my channel members. Thank you for watching the videos, for sharing the videos, for commenting on the videos, for all your thumbs ups. You guys mean more to me than you'll ever know. I have the best viewers on YouTube, and you guys prove it daily. So thank you very much. Y'all have a good night, good day, and go do something in the shop. Go make some chips. Have some fun. Y'all take care.